And welcome and warm greetings. This is Mark Emery with the National Action Task Force. Thank you very much for joining me. This will be an important and fairly short presentation I'm going to give to enable you to have a direct impact on restoring America and, frankly, the rest of the world back to the rule of law and the constitutional parameters that are set for our public servants. So let me get right into it. I'm talking about the American Legal Defense Private Trust, the ALD Trust, sponsored by the National Action Task Force, which is set up for a very special purpose. This is in partnership with the NATF, of course, and the Ecclesiastical General Assembly administered by the World Mission Church, two very essential arms to this endeavor. Our mission essentially is to establish a private special purpose vehicle which is created to provide the means to ensure due process of law and accountability for all those who would violate the public trust. And as we know all too well, those are far too many individuals who are doing that. Something has to be done to bring them back on track. And so you might label this as litigation finance. Litigation finance is essentially investors who will help support the costs of a case and then share in the distribution of proceeds for damages awards. It's a very simple concept. Legal fees are excessive in many cases, and most people simply can't afford to do it on their own. So litigation finance has blossomed as an industry to help victims get some form of justice and compensation. So we can apply that label to what we're doing. This is going to provide support for victims of injustice, and it's going to create economic opportunity for contributors to the trust, which I'll get into in detail here. The trust units, let's talk about that. Contributors can expect to exchange $500 per unit of the trust. So that would be a minimum. And so you could buy 2 units, you could buy 10 units, you could buy 100 units. All right. And those units, that contribution would be represented by the trust certificate. Unit holders then are entitled to a pro rata share of distributions from the proceeds that are generated from lien monetizations and collections, damage awards, monthly payments that we receive for various services, and donations and other contributions. All go into the trust to fund this effort. Okay? All of that goes into a pot, and what's not used for expenses gets distributed at an appropriate time to the trust unit holders. The nature of the trust is such that, no, it's not a statutory grantor trust. It's a private business trust, also known as a CBO, a contractual business organization, also known as a Massachusetts trust. You can look any of these up and get plenty of information. It's a Colado, common law trust organization. And we've got plenty of detailed information on this type of trust, which you can find on the videos on the mmgcapital.biz website. Make a note of that and go there for more detailed information. So we have a point system, and the point system is such that one unit, one certificate unit equaling $500 is the equivalent of 1 point. All right. An additional 0.1 point is earned for each month that the unit is working without a distribution. For example, you might make a contribution this month and we might not have a distribution for 6 months. Okay? You'll be accumulating points in that process, which essentially is the equivalent of a 10% return on your initial investment each and every month. So your investment grows in between the contribution date and the distribution date. All right. So after a distribution is made, then we reset. All units will start over back with 1 point per unit. So to give you an example here with these numbers, 1 unit acquired in January after 12 months earns an additional 1.2 points, which is 12 months times the 0.1 points. All right, so that's an additional 1.2 points you'll have in December in addition to the original one that you contributed. So this compensates unit holders for the time value of your money. And this is fair. For example, when a new unit holder joins in December after 12 months from your contribution, and a distribution is made right after they join, but that's 12 months after you join, or 13 months, okay? So that accounts and compensates you for the time value of money and tries to keep things as fair and level as we can. So, what are the funds being used for? First of all, there's a long list of administrative expenses that come up, copies. We've got one of our members has spent hundreds of dollars in copies, certified mailings. You know, that certainly adds up, gets quite expensive. Express mail, certified mail, registered mail, service of process. There's fees if you use the sheriff or private process servers. You've got court filing fees and other administrative uses. It all adds up quite quickly, and it's not cheap. It costs real money. All right. Then we have the costs for publishing legal notices in the newspaper. And this can easily be $400, $500, $600 a pop. And we need to do that several times, at least 3 times, for these to be effective legally. Then, once we have claims that are established, we need to do asset searches and investigations on the people against whom our claims are made. This is important when we start negotiations with a debt collector. We might assign that claim over to a debt collector, and they're not going to be interested if the debtor doesn't have any assets, right? So this is going to help us decide which ones to really get active with the debt collectors if we use a debt collector. Then we're going to be putting together video documentaries, shorts and longer documentaries, as a part of an overall larger PR campaign to bring the wrongdoers into the court of public opinion. All right, we're going to expose these crimes, expose these individuals, and bring the power of the court of public opinion upon them, and not let them hide in the shadows and the corners, the recesses of their offices, wherever they may operate from. All right, this is going to also go to support professional coaching and training and support for the victims that we'll be working with. There are very specific and detailed elements that need to be put into place to document a case. All right, these cases need to be documented, and we have a very specific procedure that needs to be followed in order to get the documentation that will result in a valid and binding claim. All right, so coaching and training will be important to work with the victims and the members that we will be working with on their cases. All right, so that's very important. We'll need paralegal assistance in document preparation, researching the case. Each case is different, each state is different, and so each case requires its own research and, of course, document preparation. Now, we know that these courts play all kinds of tricks to delay, to stall, to obfuscate, to diffuse, to distract, to avoid the real issues. And so most of these cases that we've dealt with so far have involved extended, protracted documentation and paperwork and the research that goes with it. So this is a very key element that must be in good order. And I don't need to say it, it takes money to get these things done. Then on select civil rights cases that go to federal court for Title 42 lawsuits, denial of due process, which we can prosecute on just about every case that we deal with. It'll be probably advantageous if we use good attorneys with the conscience who will go after these mortgage servicers who are doing all kinds of fraudulent documents and that type of thing. They won't do anything against the judges or the courts, but they will go after the fraudsters operating in the private realm. These are the mortgage servicers, the banks, the debt collectors, people like this who are using all kinds of tricks and traps outside of the law to deny you of your due process, and ultimately, in the case of mortgages and foreclosures, ultimately to steal your home. All right, that's just what they do. That's what it's all about. So then, of course, there's exposure, there's prosecution, there's collections involved. So there's a lot of funding that's needed for each and every case, and this is where it'll be going to. Most people are not financially capable of supporting that. So that's why we need this fund. So let's look at some numbers. All right. Let's say we had a $20 million claim and we sold it to collectors for 10 cents on the dollars. That means that claim is liquidated for $2 million. So let's say the person who has the case agrees to split 50-50 with the trust. They keep 50%. 50% goes to the trust, so that's $1 million to the trust, and the trust then distributes 50% of that to the certificate unit holders, holding the other 50% for operations and expansion. We want to set up chapters, or AKA franchises, in every state, independently managed, with our procedures, our processes, and establishing a network. And so that's going to take money, right? So let's look at a $100 million claim. And that figure is not by any means out of reach. I can certainly envision, by virtue of the penalties involved with certain crimes, as well as the nature of the damages involved, that $100 million is not going to be difficult to achieve in many cases. Okay, so just playing with numbers here, all right? So a $100 million claim pays $10 million from the collectors, all right? Half of that goes to the trust, and then the trust distributes half of that to the certificate unit holders, which is $2.5 million. So breaking that down further, let's look at what that means per certificate unit. Now, of course, at $500 each, 10 certificate units means we've only raised $5,000. I mean, that's nothing. That's probably not even going to cover one case. But just playing with numbers, all right, a distribution of $500,000, all right, to the trust or to the certificate unit holders means that each certificate unit is going to be worth a distribution of $50,000 in that example. Okay, now we're going to get past 10 certificate units almost immediately. So let's just say we had 50 certificate units that are issued, which would be raising only $25,000, which again is not very much. All right, but in that instance, that distribution, each $500 certificate unit would receive a distribution of $10,000. Now, I don't know what your experience is, but in my experience, that's a pretty good return. You know, would that be worth waiting 6 months or maybe a year for, if that's what it took? Okay, so let's just take a look at both of these charts combined. We can kind of follow it down. So if we're looking at a $50 million claim sold for $5 million, all right, the trust ends up distributing $1.2 million to certificate unit holders. So if we had even 100 certificate units, now this isn't people contributors, these are units. One person might come in with 20 units for $10,000. Okay. So 20 units is possible for one person. So keep that in mind. All right. So when we're looking at the figure of 100, we're not looking at people, we're looking at units. So in this case, a $50 million claim, for dividing that up amongst 100 units would still be $12,500 distribution per $500 unit. Now, again, that's not too shabby. This is potentially highly profitable. So those are the numbers. So consider this your retirement plan. I mean, what better retirement plan could you find out there? There is no financial advisor who's going to give you better opportunities. Okay? We can redirect IRA funds. If you've got an IRA, we can show you how to convert that to a self-directed IRA. We simply change the custodian to a custodian who will allow you to direct those IRA funds wherever you like. All right, that's self-directed IRA. You can choose the investments. All right, and in doing so, there's no taxes, there's no penalties involved. All right, we've done that several times before. That's old hat for us. Okay, so that can be done. If you have an IRA, think, well, what portion of that might you like to redirect into something like this, and really give that IRA some hope for the future. Because many IRA investments are just simply not too exciting from my experience. Do you have a business? All right, is that business producing cash flow? You might consider recurring monthly purchases of certificate units, maybe 2, 5, or 10 a month, and start stacking them, like you would stack gold or silver coins. Okay, stack your certificates and really start building significant interest in the trust. All right, so that's an option. All right. Warren Buffett says, never invest in a business you can't understand. And I know for a fact there's a lot of folks out there who have investments that are not doing terribly great. You might consider liquidating those and repositioning your portfolio to some degree. All right. Again, diversification is key. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but you can certainly think about reinvesting and repositioning what you currently have. So by contributing to the trust, you're really, really helping others who, many of them are in dire straits. They've lost their home, or they're on the precipice of losing their home, or they've been abused, they've been thrown in jail. The horror stories are endless. All right, the system is really abusing people. And so by participating and contributing here, you are really helping others. And you're also, of course, helping yourself with that kind of profit potential. I mean, you can see how much brighter your future could look, once we start getting through some of these collections processes. And full disclosure, we haven't completed the process yet, but we've got several cases in the pipeline. In fact, we've got one member who already has a $13 million lien, and she hasn't even gotten started yet. That's like an appetizer. All right. I fully expect, knowing her case, she'll have a claim for over $100 million. There's no doubt in my mind. Okay. So you'll help yourself immensely. And by contributing, you are also helping to restore justice and accountability in America. Too many of these public servants are just running rogue, outside of the law, outside of their oath of office, outside of the rules of the court, outside of local statutes. They're just doing whatever they want, and they don't care who pays the price. All right? We're here to stop that. We're here to say no. We're here to restore justice and accountability so that we, as hardworking people, have something to look forward to in terms of our future. So, this is impact investing. What's impact investing? Impact investing is putting your money into a project that aligns with your values. That's impact investing. So, does this align with your values? That would be a key question. If so, this is impact investing. So, in summary, we're talking about a low minimum. One certificate's only $500, easy entry for everybody. Potential profit is far and above other alternatives that you can find out there in the marketplace. This helps others obtain justice, to save or recover their homes, or get recompense for their rights being violated, their family being destroyed, their emotional stability being ruined. There's a lot of damage out there, folks, and this can help go a long way to get recompense for some of that. Of course, it aligns with your values, and this sends a message to the crooks, the thieves, and the tyrants who are running roughshod over Americans. This helps restore American values of liberty and the rule of law, which is all that we seek. That's all that we want, is the rule of law, constitutional parameters put around these people. So it leaves only one question, right? And you know what the question is. How many units would you like to start with? 1, 10, 20? What kind of position are you in? Take a look at your financial portfolio and condition and let us know what you'd like to start with, because we know this meets up with most people's values and needs. You can do that by sending us an email. We can set up a meeting to discuss it further with you. And with that, that's it, folks. I want to thank you for making it through the presentation, for staying with me, for giving me your attention. And most of all, I want to thank you for giving this some serious consideration, because it's highly needed and you can benefit greatly. All right. We'll see you on the other side. Take care and God bless.